everyone, this is Nikachu, and we're going to talk about Gutshot today, because Gutshot is a card that a lot of people are asking me about. The biggest question is, where do they side in Gutshot? If Gutshot is worth so many slots in the sideboard, or worth sideboard slots at all, exactly where am I bringing them in? Why is it so good? Is it good at all? Well, let me tell you, I love Gutshot. I am a huge proponent of Gutshot. I've played it many times in the past. It comes in and out. I really like bringing it in when Affinity is big, because it is a card that is free to cast. It is free to cast. It's very mana efficient. Let's get to why Merfolk... what problems Merfolk has as a deck, and the biggest problem is that it is very clunky. We are a very slow deck. Even with Aether Vial on turn 1, we have to wait turn after turn after turn before we get an investment from that card. That's not going to help us when our opponent is coming out of the gates really fast and attacking us very significantly by turns 3 and 4. Because we are such a clunky deck, our curve is relatively high in like the 2 drops, 3 drops, and 4 drops. We need something very mana efficient to help us get back into those games, to help or slow them down so that we can catch up. And Gutshot is perfect because it is free. And a great example is against Affinity, they have tons of 1 toughness creatures like Memnite, Vault Scourge, Steel Overseer, Ink Moth Nexus, Blink Moth Nexus, Signal Pest. There's tons of them. We have a lot of really good targets for the card that will help us either kill off very significant things, like Steel Overseer is very, very significant. If you can kill that thing immediately, then perhaps the game won't get out of control. So we can interact with them while we tap out. That's really important. We're not going to hold up any mana for Echoing Truth, Dismember, or Vapor Snag. We can tap out, play our lords, get our game going while slowing our opponent down just enough for us to take over the game. But the beautiful thing about Gutshot over, say, something like Hurkyl's Recall is that it is playable against almost all of Modern. It is a very flexible card. It is not good against just stuff like Affinity, but also decks that have mana dorks. For example, the Abzan Company deck strongly depends on Viscera in order to combo off. And even now, with Counters Company, it is very dependent on the new Vizier card that has 1 toughness, also to help combo off. It is like their new Malira, and we can interact with that combo with Gutshot at instant speed. So we're going to go over all the archetypes where Gutshot is good, or just even playable. Not even talking about good, just playable. So, matchups where maybe we've got some dead cards in our deck, maybe you have main deck Spell Pierce, and you're going to have to take out those Spell Pierces against something like maybe Death and Taxes, because Gutshot can come in against them for Thalia and Flicker Wisp, for example. So, going through the decks, we can go through the next one, which is Death and Taxes. Death and Taxes plays Flicker Wisp, Blade Splicer, Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. And Thalia is significant, by the way. That first strike creature makes it very difficult for us to attack into it. Even if we have a Lord out, they could, at instant speed, flash in Flicker Wisp with an Aether Vial to remove one of our Lords from combat, and making our Lord just a 2/2 creature, and then they block profitably with the Thalia. Additionally, they can just use Path to Exile or some effect to get rid of a Lord on the battlefield. So attacking into Thalia is pretty difficult, and it's very nice that we have Gutshot, which is going to cost 1, by the way, because Thalia is going to make all the non-creature spells cost 1 more, to be able to interact with that card. Flicker Wisp is a very dangerous card in the Death and Taxes matchup. I mean, it's really good in combat, but otherwise there are situations where the board gets really gummed up, and the only thing that can attack is the Flicker Wisp that's flying in the air. And if you don't have Kira in play, or you don't have Kira in your deck, the Flicker Wisp will do you in pretty well. Blade Splicer, it may not feel great to Gutshot the Blade Splicer, because they already got some value out of it with a 3/3 golem token. But let me tell you, when they try to Restoration Angel and re-blink the Blade Splicer, you're going to be happy to have the Gutshot in your hand to deal with that card, because otherwise they're going to have another 3/3 golem creature. It can kill Phyrexian Revoker that has a 1 toughness, and you know, let's not forget that sometimes you can just shoot them in the face for 1. But anyway, so Gutshot has a lot of application against Death and Taxes. Moving on, it's actually quite playable against Merfolk. Merfolk is a huge race, and it's all about tempo, actually. It's totally about tempo. Harbinger of the Tides is an absolute bomb in that matchup. So whatever you can do mana efficiently is going to be very largely in your benefit. To be able to Gutshot even a Curse Catcher on turn 1 is going to help a lot, because that Curse Catcher most definitely is either going to be worth maybe a Lord or like one of your creatures, one of your 2-drops, or it is going to deal like anywhere between 4 to 6 points of damage through the course of the game, and for you to be able to remove it at instant speed is great. Gutshot kills Phantasmal Image if your opponent is playing with it, just ultimately just kills it on the spot, unless they copied Master of Waves, then it's protected. But it kills Silvergill Adept. It can make Lord math more complicated, because if someone tries to block with all their Lords, and thinking, you know, they're 1 toughness out of range and they're going to keep everything, they would be wrong, because the Gutshot can then eventually kill the 1 Lord that was keeping them all alive, and then after that guy falls, everyone else falls. Gutshot also deals with it can break the Kira shield in some situations, so that maybe you can Harbinger the Tides something else. It can kill Vendilion Click, and yeah, I think that's about it, what it can kill out of Merfolk. So against Nightfall, you don't want to have too many of them, but you can bring in a few, because it shoots down their Mana Dorks. Their Birds of Paradises and their Noble Hierarchs, but not only that, they also play with Selfless Spirit, which has 1 toughness. So at end of turn, you could break that Selfless Spirit, make them sacrifice it to give their creatures indestructible, and then from there on, you know, go ahead with your game plan. But yeah, it is quite effective against Mana Dork decks, because, well, we can slow them down to play at our rate of pace. You kill off their Mana Dork, and that kills off all their 3-drops for turn 2. Things like Knight of the Reliquary, Kitchen Finks, what else am I missing here? Courser of Crewfix, Spell Queller's off the board. So they're the Tireless Tracker. There are a lot of really good effective turn 2 plays that are only effective if they get their creature out on turn 2, not on turn 3. If it's on turn 3, then I think we are going to be advantaged, because their turn 3 play isn't going to be... their 3-drops on turn 3 aren't better than our 3-drops on turn 3, like Merfolk. Sometimes you're going to have to look at what's in your opponent's deck to see if Gutshot is effective. For example, against certain versions of Bushwhacker Zoo, or even Goblin decks, I think Gutshot is very good. Gutshot can... let's just talk about Goblins. Goblins kills Goblin, Bushwhacker, and Reckless Bushwhacker at instant speed. And you really want to remove these creatures from the board, because you don't want to be trading with your creatures against them, and they're going to be attacking for a lot. So be able to interact with them at instant speed when they are a fast deck is quite excellent. And the same thing with Bushwhacker Zoo decks. Sometimes they play with Dryad Militant that you can kill. Experiment 1 comes into play as just a 1/1 creature. Occasionally you can kill a Wild Nikachu, because on turn 2 you Spreading Seas their their Stomping Ground, turning the Wild Nikachu into a 1/1 creature, and then you finish it off with Gutshot. You can still kill Thalia, that's in that deck. Reckless Bushwhacker. So there are enough targets out of these sort of Zoo-ish decks or Goblin decks that you can make Gutshot playable. Gutshot is actually fantastic against Delver decks. Delver of Secrets is a 1/1 creature, and to be able to mana efficiently kill that thing very, very early, especially on turn 1, is great, while saving yourself life. I mean, if I had to, I would dismember the thing, and it's very nice to finish that creature off and never have to look at it again. But 4 life is quite a bit. I'm still willing to do it, but Gutshot does it at a better rate because you do it for free and you lose less life. Same thing with Young Pyromancer. It's worth dismembering, but I'm not going to be super thrilled about doing that. On top of that, it still requires mana. Like on turn 2, I want to play a Lord. I don't want to play Dismember and then put nothing in play. But with Gutshot, you can put something in play and Gutshot the Young Pyromancer on the same turn. Much more mana efficient, you lose less life, and much more effective. Let's not also forget that Snapcaster Mage is in a lot of Delver-style decks, and Gutshotting that thing is good too, because a lot of their, even though they're going to flash something back, that's fine. A lot of the times when they're playing Snapcaster Mage, it's with the intention of blocking something and getting like a ton of value out of it. And to be able to remove the blocker will usually is enough of a tempo swing in our favor to close out a game. Fairies is a very fringe deck, but it's still a deck out there that is vulnerable to Gutshot because stuff like Vendilion Click gets nailed at instant speed. For like it has 1 toughness, Spellstutter Sprite has 1 toughness, and Snapcaster Mage has 1 toughness. Gutshot is fantastic actually against fairies because so they play Spellstutter Sprite with maybe like a, I don't know, like another Spellstutter Sprite in play with the intention of countering one of our spells. Well, we just Gutshot the other thing and then ruin their math. Nice, you've got a 1/1 flash creature. Congratulations. Don't forget that you can bring in Gutshot against many other mana dork decks like the Ponza deck, the deck that's playing a bunch of Stone Rains, the land destruction, the green-red ramping land destruction deck. They're not going to ramp into their land destruction if you start sniping off some of their creatures. Although I have to admit, they don't feel like Gutshot is super effective against that deck because they will just inevitably play their lands and then do that stuff anyway. And I also don't think that Merfolk is particularly weak to that strategy because our lands are not super important. Our Ether Vial does very, very well in those situations, and we have a lot of counter spells for those land destruction spells. But it's still playable. You could still bring it in if you think you have enough dead cards. Let's talk a little bit about Counters Company. I think this is a great card against Counters Company. I know because a lot of people have given me great feedback about how they were very well positioned against the Counters Company decks in open events with Gutshot sniping down their mana creatures. I also know it's effective because I play tested against my Pro Tour friends, and who are very proficient with Abzan Company and Counters Company, and I had a killing record against them. So the Gutshot is fantastic. Why is it good? A lot of people will think, well, you know what, it's not good because it doesn't interact with the infinite mana combo whatsoever. Unless the Vizier is out first and the Devoted Druid is out second. And this is true. It does not interact with the infinite mana combo, but what it does do is force our opponent to draw that combo in their hand. If you don't have that combo in your hand, then we're not going to even let you assemble it, because the deck is very consistent, but it's only consistent because it can play things like Chord of Calling and Collected Company, which they're jamming a ton of those cards of. But they're not going to be casting any of those things if they can't get to 4 mana. So if we Gutshot their mana dorks, things like Birds of Paradise and Noble Hierarch, then they're not even going to be close to casting any of those spells. They're going to be trapped in their hand, and they won't be able to assemble the infinite mana combo. And they're going to have to be playing some land drops. They might have to spend another turn. Yeah, they're going to be playing land drops. They're going to be playing creatures. And so long as they're doing those things and not assembling their infinite mana combo, we're going to be able to roll them over. And most importantly, we are again interacting with them at free speed. We don't pay anything so that we can tap out and play our creatures, stuff like Curse Catcher, Silvergill Adept, and our Lords. And that is exactly where we want to be against a deck that can just kill us out of nowhere very, very quickly. Like it's sort of a turn 3 deck where they just assemble this stupid combo and then we're dead. You know, turn 1 Mana Dork, turn 2 Devoted Druid, turn 3 Coco into the Vizier, get infinite mana, search up, Walking Ballista, kill you. Elves is a pretty troublesome matchup, but not nearly as much if we have Gutshot. They're really, really fast, but we can kill off their synergy keep them a little bit more off of Coco if we're playing with stuff like Gutshot. All the mana dorks, Heritage Druid, the really important stuff is all one mana. Dwinen's Elite will only create a elf warrior if there's already an elf in play, but surprise, we can shoot down that Heritage Druid and then you're not going to have anything at all. Amulet Bloom is currently playing Sakura Tribe Scout as their new Summer Bloom. It's just a spell that helps put lands into play, and that is definitely something that we can Gutshot. And lastly, there's Infect. Not so much Infect these days, but it's still around, and you're going to be happy to have Gutshot because it hits everything that they have in the deck. We're talking Inkmoth Nexus, Noble Hierarch, Blighted Agent, and Glistener Elf. Instant speed. If they use a mutagenic growth on the thing, whatever, that's fine. They don't have that mutagenic growth in their hand anymore, and keeping them off cards as much as possible is still fine. And the upside is if they don't have the mutagenic growth, then the thing is dead, and we are really in the plus. The deck is like pretty mana efficient. It's really fast, so being able to interact with Infect at instant speed is very effective. So I think more or less I've gone over every single, most of the archetypes that exist right now in Modern or potentially can exist that Gutshot is good against. The big decks that you're going to want it against are Affinity and Counters Company. Those are the big ones, and then there is this big umbrella of other decks that it can be played against. Like, not to mention, you know, like, even if you go to a GP, like 10% of your matchups might be fringe matchups where Gutshot is going to be playable. It's going to be playable. So I hope I've helped clear up if Gutshot is right for you. This has been Nikachu talking about Gutshot in Modern Merfolk.